They're saying something to me. First, I need to go up and then down? No, scratch that. The princess. Of course, it's the princess. She's speaking to me, telling me things. I need to beat the arcades. Beat them all. Wait, no, leave me alone. No.
FREDD'N.
Well. It seems the Pizzaplex has more mysteries to offer than we could have ever imagined. From the death of Glamrock Bonnie, check out our last day for the truth on that matter, to the seemingly tons of missing kids and adults the Pizzaplex seems to have. Security Breach is filled with tons of skeletons in its closet. But today, we are going to tackle the strangest skeleton of all. Hell, this skeleton will solve not only Security Breach, but Help Wanted 2 and the future of the games as we know it. But to understand this skeleton, we need to take a closer look at Security Breach itself. You see, throughout Security Breach, as I'm sure you know, you can find duffel bags containing messages that give you a better understanding of the background leading up to the game. However, and this will be important later, we don't have to say all of them have to have been placed in the past. But when I was reading through these messages, I noticed something peculiar. While most of the messages seem to be directed towards either Pizzaplex staff, the Pizzaplex higher-ups, or customer complaints, there's a certain set of messages that seem to be directed towards no one. They're maintenance logs, but they read more as scattered thoughts that seem to appear into the writer's mind than notes that actually relate to, repairing the arcade machines. For example, the note Princess Quest 1, maintenance log. Maintenance log. There's a Princess Quest 1 machine somewhere in the building. An actual stand-up arcade. I guess the devs pulled it from that old mobile game. Why port it to arcade? That's only one of these messages. There's much more. One for every planned playable arcade machine, Chica's Feeding Frenzy, Monty's A-Arcade game, and many more. Of course, the nature of these messages is for you, the player, to become suspicious of the arcade machines spread across the Pizzaplex, questioning if there's more to them, and eventually leading you to beating Princess Quest 3 and rescuing Vanessa, gaining what seems to be the canon ending of the game. So with that knowledge, it's safe to assume that these are the most important notes in the game, right? Well, despite that fact, no one really gives these notes a closer look. They don't question what exactly we're being told here and how this all relates to a singular man. A man I've dubbed the Arcade Craniac. Yes, like that one channel. The Arcade Craniac seems to be a crazed Pizzaplex worker obsessed with the arcade machines, though it wasn't always this way. The notes we find from him seem to tell us quite a disturbing story. We already talked about the first Princess Quest log, so let's look at the second. Princess Quest 2 maintenance log. Maintenance log. Princess Quest 2. It won't boot properly. No idea why. Shuts down when I try to play like it's personal. It doesn't matter anyway. I still haven't found PQ1. Notice the wording. It's personal. The arcade machine seems to be conscious. They think and can judge people. This idea is followed up in the final Arcade Craniac log, Exit Interview. Exit Interview. They are working together. The arcades, they're hiding something. The glitches glitch them all at the same time. Then the princess will recognize me. She's testing me. I am not yet worthy. The others are protecting it. Let me stay. I am so close. Just one more night, please. I can save the princess. Let's take a minute to analyze exactly what this is telling us. All of these important arcade machines, Chica's Feeding Frenzy, Monty's A-Arcade, and Balloon World, with Princess Quest being the head honcho, calling the shots for the other arcade machines, even being protected by them. It somehow communicates the idea to the Arcade Craniac that he isn't worthy. Perhaps Princess Quest 3 won't turn on for him for whatever reason, though the note Red Flag tells us that eventually the princess deems him worthy enough to beat Princess Quest 1 and 2. He ends off the interview by saying that he needs one more night. He's desperate to stay in the pizzaplex, and I think he might have gotten his wish. However, to understand the next part of this theory and the Arcade Craniac as a whole, we need to first look to Portal. If you don't know anything about Portal, allow me to do a quick recap for you, and I mean very quick, as I already have a video on the subject that you can check out right here. Portal follows our main character Shell as she goes through various test chambers in the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. She's tormented by a homicidal AI named GLaDOS, who is also a woman named Carolyn, and Shell defeats her, exploding the center. However, she is dragged right back in and deeper into the facility than she could have ever imagined. Portal 2 follows her once again, butting heads with the GLaDOS AI, where she is put through a whole host of more tests to go through. Again, watch my video about it. But I say all of this to reinforce the idea that Portal is filled with test chambers, but inside some of these test chambers is a disturbing secret. Tucked into secret little rooms, deliberately hiding from you, are rat dens. These rat dens seem to be left by someone who's actively living in Aperture, hiding under the nose of GLaDOS, and as we learn in the Lab Rat comic, that's exactly what's happening. In the Lab Rat comic, we learn about Doug Rattman, a scientist working at Aperture who survives GLaDOS's neurotoxin massacre on Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. He speaks to his trusted friend, a companion cube. Images of that companion cube also show up in the rat dens in-game. While he survived the massacre, that doesn't mean he is allowed to escape the facility. Doug is trapped, wandering the halls of the testing facility with his companion cube, making little living spaces and test chambers hidden just enough from GLaDOS. GLaDOS keeps him alive, toying with him, reminding him of his dead coworkers and playing with his mental condition. When GLaDOS is defeated and Shell is dragged back into the facility, Doug decides to save Shell's life, making sure that her sleep is indefinite until someone wakes her up. With this final act of heroism, he climbs into a bed himself and closes his eyes, presumably dead. After hearing all that, I know what you're thinking. What does any of this have to do with Five Nights at Freddy's? Well, previously I've mentioned how I thought FNAF was taking plot cues from Portal. A little rundown of that video, which I've mentioned way too many times now, is that the idea is like building a newer, higher tech version of an establishment right above the older location, a robot's AI mimicking the dead lover of a CEO that sucks at running their company that turns out to be evil and in charge of everything in the facility, and ridiculous ideas like claiming you invented recycling, not to mention in Security Breach, there is literally a cake that is a lie. All of this shows us that FNAF might be heavily inspired by Valve's puzzle game, but I believe this connection runs even deeper than we previously thought. I believe Doug Rattman is the arcade conspiracist. Well, not exactly Doug Rattman, but a FNAF character that's a stand-in for him. But I hear you ask, there's obviously a difference between the two. Portal implies that Doug Rattman is actively living in Aperture during the events of the game, then his ghost is present in the sequel through the track Ghost of Rattman, where you can literally hear his spiritual voice. But the Arcade Craniac couldn't possibly still be alive during Security Breach and dead during Ruin, right? Well, that's where I beg to differ. You see, I'm going to claim right now that the Arcade Craniac is still alive and in the pizzaplex during the events of Security Breach, and I have good reason to believe it. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, I would recommend doing so now. First, I want to talk about a few notes that may support this idea before hitting you with the grand slam. The first note is false alarm. Security report. A local officer came by tonight. He said he was responding to an emergency call from someone inside the pizzaplex. There's no way that's possible. I was the only one here, and I certainly didn't make any outside calls. He wanted to look around, but I sent him away. Just another prank call. Vanessa. We learned that someone is in the pizzaplex way after closing and is calling the police, but who could the culprit be? It can't be Vanessa, as she is the one in the log talking about it, nor can it be Vanessa's alter ego, Vanny, because why would she call the cops on herself? It makes no sense. I don't think it'd be Gregory either, because he'd probably be under Glitchtrap's control in Patient 46 during this time, so that either leaves a random missing child, which would seem unlikely, or some kind of adult still inside the pizzaplex. But who? Well, let's read another note and see if the answer gets clearer. Our next note is AC inspection. Thank you for contacting low-budget building contractors. We have done a preliminary inspection and found nothing wrong with your ventilation system. The loud clanging, banging, and scraping noises, which were reported, don't appear to be reproducible. Call us if it happens again. Invoice attached. Keith. Now, you could attribute this note to the wind-up DJ Music Man, and I would be inclined to agree with you if there wasn't a follow-up to this note that doesn't add up. The note is called Behind the Maze. I swear this is the last one. Maintenance report. I still can't find what is making all that clanging noise in the AC system. This is the 5th visit this week. If I could reach that stupid vent behind the exercise maze room, I could get to the catwalks over Gator Gulf and take a look. Maybe someone who works in Mazercise knows how. This doesn't make sense to be for the wind-up Music Men, and I'll tell you why. This vent that the note is referring to doesn't have a wind-up Music Man. That's right. Despite this being a suspiciously open vent, there's no Music Man in it. Only a long, dark walk that leads to Monty's walkway. Remember, that open vent before you enter. It's like that before Gregory gets there. In fact, that's not the only open vent we can find in Security Breach. We actually see an open vent with no explanation in the beginning of the game. Gregory goes through this very vent. It's actually the first thing you're introduced to after Glamrock Freddy's green room. But there's another vent that's suspiciously open in the game, and it's a big one. One that possibly confirms the entire theory, and it is in the East Arcade. The East Arcade is an interesting place. On the surface, it seems to be an uninteresting part of the pizzaplex, just a normal stealth section where you can avoid Roxy, and that's about it. But strangely, not only does this arcade have a strange connection to the puppet through its puppet wires and puppet-themed hallway leading into it, but it also is a centerpiece for a lot of the mysteries in Security Breach, most notable of which being the death of Glamrock Bonnie through it being one of the last places he was seen, and of course, our mystery today, the arcade conspiracy. But what's the connection, you may ask? That's when I show you this, an open vent behind out of order arcade machines. Remember, my Freddles, the Arcade Craniac was a maintenance worker on these very arcade machines. In fact, around these arcades, you can find maintenance tools showing that these out-of-order arcade machines were being worked on. I know what you might be saying. Okay, we have one vent that connects to our Craniac, but how does this relate to the other two? Why can't there just be 3 unrelated vents or one vent unrelated to the other 2? Well, let's think about where these vents lead. Of course, the East Arcade vent is an arcade, something our Craniac is interested in. Then the one in Masersize leads directly to Monty Golf, which contains Monty's A arcade, something the Craniac actively talks about. And finally, Rockstar Row, with a vent that leads to every green room. Green rooms that each contain an arcade machine. I think it's clear to see these vents belong to the Arcade Craniac, but then you may ask, what happens to our Arcade Craniac? Where does he end up? Who is he? Well, I think we know. We've played it ourselves. Help Wanted 2. If you need a quick refresher of Help Wanted 2, let me catch you up. In Help Wanted 2, you play as an employee going through training, and as the training goes on, we learn that the things we're experiencing might be more personal to our player than we thought, doing and seeing things that shouldn't have anything to do with simple employee training. And as we come to this realization, we hear voice lines from a mysterious mystic hippo that all but confirms an eerie feeling. Lines like, "When are you? Have you ever taken a look at your hands? I mean, really looked at them? Remember?" All point towards our character being in a strange circumstance, and then we get the reveal. At the end of the game, we see our character get killed by nightmare staff bots and then uploaded to the system to doom Cassie and putting on the Vanny mask. However, that's not it. Our player character, now in the pizzaplex system, recovers the memory dolls of Afton's victims and unlocks the mysterious Princess Quest 4. It starts out as a normal arcade at first until devolving into the princess walking out of the game and recognizing our player, with us, the player, not the princess, beating the game and freeing the world of Glitchtrap, giving the people still alive one last fighting chance. If you don't already see the similarities already, I don't know what to tell you. Doug Rattman dies by the hands of the Aperture turrets, and in one final heroic action, gives Shell a fighting chance. That's right, our Help Wanted 2 protagonist is the Arcade Craniac. Not only that, but his identity is simple. The Arcade Craniac is Cassie's dad. Throughout Ruin, we hear about Cassie's dad, a person whose favorite character is Bonnie and who works at the pizzaplex, or at least worked there. And in Help Wanted 2, we're given some strange imagery between the protagonist and Bonnie as a character. The most obvious one is at the end, where a Bonnie mask is familiar to you. Not to mention, Cassie notably collects a Bonnie mask in Ruin with no real explanation. And there's one more very interesting Bonnie symbol in Help Wanted 2 that ties everything together. Remember how I said you, the player, collect the memory dolls of Afton's victims? Well, after collecting each doll, they appear in very strange places that relate directly to an aspect of your character. Chica is in the kitchen, Foxy by MCM characters, because he is one, Golden Freddy by Glamrock Bonnie, watch my previous video for further clarification, and so on and so forth. But Bonnie's is the strangest, placed against the arcade machines, next to Roxanne Wolf, Cassie's favorite character, and Glamrock Freddy, Gregory's favorite character. Bonnie is Cassie's dad's favorite character, and he's leaning against glitched arcade machines. It was all there, and we all had missed it. So, what do you think of my theory? Am I onto something? Tell your thoughts and make sure to be respectful while doing so, because at the end of the day, it's just a FNAF theory, and if you're too rude, I'll find you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.